largely out of harm's way, other than losing power for a few hours, the inside of the house sometimes smelling like smoke, and some other very minor inconveniences, we were fine. However, I know people who lost their homes, people who had to evacuate, and generally, whether your home was directly impacted or not, we were all living in a constant state of fear and anxiety. But what has been truly fucked up is outsiders, people who do not live in California at all, sort of cheering on this happening to the folks who live here. Obviously, some of the biggest headlines have been about which celebrities have lost their homes. And that seemed to create this perception that the only people who lost anything were millionaires who could theoretically afford such an unspeakable loss. I can assure you, a lot of people who were not millionaires and not famous lost their homes. And just because you're famous and rich, that doesn't mean you deserve something awful like that to happen to you either. The other thing that was especially bothersome and racist was the number of right-wing conservative jackasses who rose up to blame the fires on diversity, equity, and inclusion, since the fire chief is a queer woman, who, upon her appointment, she said that she wanted to emphasize creating an inclusive workforce. It seems that the white folks who constantly bitch and complain are operating from an attitude that only white people are qualified to do these jobs. Actually, those people think white people are the only ones qualified to do any job. Diversity, equity, and inclusion does not mean hiring less qualified people. It means opening up the hiring pool to include people who have historically been frozen out of those jobs because of their race or sexuality. The Los Angeles Fire Department has a pretty nasty history when it comes to racial discrimination. In fact, as recently as 2022, organizations representing Black and Latino firefighters called for a federal investigation of the LA Fire Department for racist and discriminatory practices. That is why the department was public about its efforts to increase diversity. It was a response. So I'm wondering where all those white people who complain about DEI now, where were they when Blacks and Latinos and women were being systematically discriminated against for years? If they cared as much about equality as they claim they do, how come these same white folks didn't look at these companies, businesses, and other organizations and say, gee, why is everyone in the decision-making role white? Why are white people only being hired and promoted? I can tell you why. The racism and discrimination was acceptable as long as they were the main beneficiary. DEI has given them this false impression that they won't be as desired in the workforce. And by the way, more than half of Los Angeles' fire department employees are white, in a city where white folks are only 28% of the population. Go figure. Anyway, I'm sending good vibes, positivity, prayers to all the folks in Los Angeles. We're going to get through this.
Listen up.